The HFY Armada dropped out of hyperspace near Jupiter, and Fleet Commander Zaxtor felt the familiar thrill of conquest rushing through his veins. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devastation, watching the tactical display light up with the positions of his 800 warships. Before him, through the massive viewport, he could see the small blue planet in the distance, Earth, his next trophy. Zaxtor was enormous even by HFY standards. He stood over 3 meters tall, his body covered in thick plates of natural armor that had turned dark gray with age. His claws had ended the lives of hundreds of enemies in personal combat. His fleet had destroyed 4 civilizations. This would be the 5th. "Report," he growled. His tactical officer, a younger HFY named Vexnar, studied his screens with confusion. "Commander, I am detecting very little orbital infrastructure around the target planet. No defense stations. No weapons platforms. Their fleet appears to be minimal." Zaxtor made a sound of contempt. "As expected. These humans are barely out of their infancy as a spacefaring species. They have no idea what true power looks like." He had studied the intelligence reports carefully. Humans were small, weak creatures with soft skin and fragile bodies. They had no natural weapons, no claws, no armor. They relied entirely on their primitive technology. Their military forces were designed to fight each other, not to face a galactic power. This would not even be a battle. It would be an execution. "Commander," another officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from a human vessel. It is approaching our position." Zaxtor turned to the viewport and saw it. A single ship, tiny compared to even his smallest destroyer, moving slowly toward the Armada. It was almost insulting. "Put it on screen," he ordered. The face of a human female appeared before him. She had light brown hair pulled back tightly, and her eyes were a pale gray that reminded Zaxtor of ice. She wore a uniform he did not recognize, dark blue with silver markings. "HFY Fleet," she said calmly. "This is Admiral Lisa Patterson of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered restricted space. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces and return to your territory. There will be no second warning." Zaxtor stared at her for a moment. Then he began to laugh. The sound was harsh and grating, echoing through the bridge. His officers joined in, their amusement filling the air. "One ship," Zaxtor said between laughs. "One tiny ship threatens 800 warships. Human, do you have any idea who you are speaking to? I have destroyed worlds. I have burned cities and enslaved millions. And you dare to give me orders?" Admiral Patterson's expression did not change. "I have delivered my message. Your response has been noted. Patterson out." The screen went dark. Zaxtor's laughter faded into a cold smile. "Destroy her." 12 destroyers broke formation and opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked across the void, converging on the small human vessel. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, scattering debris in all directions. "Target eliminated," Vexnar reported. "Good." Zaxtor settled back into his command chair. "Now, let us proceed to Earth. I want landing forces ready within the hour. We will begin with their major population centers, break their will quickly, and the rest will surrender." The Armada began to move forward, 800 instruments of destruction advancing on an undefended world. Then Vexnar's voice cut through the silence. "Commander, I am detecting new contacts." "Explain." "Energy signatures, sir. Many of them. They are emerging from behind the moons of the gas giant." "How many?" Zaxtor leaned forward. 2,000 ships, Commander. All armed. All targeting us." The viewport filled with light as the human fleet revealed itself. They had been hiding in the shadows of Jupiter's moons, powered down and silent, waiting for the HFY to commit to their approach. Now they emerged like predators, rising from the darkness. The ships were unlike anything in the HFY database. They were sleek and angular, covered in weapons that glowed with unfamiliar energy. They moved in perfect formation, thousands of vessels acting as one. Zaxtor felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. "This is impossible," he said. "Our intelligence said they had no fleet. They had nothing. Commander, we are being hailed." A new face appeared on the screen. It was a human male, older, with gray hair and steady dark eyes. He sat in a command chair, surrounded by holographic displays, and there was no trace of fear or uncertainty in his expression. "I am Admiral Ben Carver of the United Earth Defense Force," he said quietly. "You were warned. You chose not to listen. That was your mistake." Zaxtor found his voice. "You cannot defeat us. We are the HFY. We have conquered half the galaxy." "You have conquered the weak," Admiral Carver replied. "You have never faced humanity. Allow me to show you the difference." The human ships opened fire. Zaxtor had witnessed many battles in his long career, but he had never seen anything like this. Human weapons tore through HFY shields as if they were not there. Missiles that should have been easy to intercept somehow dodged every countermeasure, finding their targets with impossible accuracy. Human pilots flew with a combination of reckless courage and precise coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Within minutes, the HFY formation began to crumble. Ships exploded. Debris filled the space around them. The screams of dying crew members echoed through the communication channels. "Return fire," Zaxtor roared. "All ships, return fire." His fleet obeyed, but their weapons seemed slow and clumsy compared to the human assault. For every human ship they damaged, they lost 10 of their own. The battle had become a slaughter, and the HFY were the ones being slaughtered. Vexnar turned to his commander with terror in his eyes. "Sir, we have lost 400 ships. Our fleet is in full retreat. We cannot win this fight." Zaxtor stared at the viewport, watching his armada burn. He had come here expecting to destroy a primitive species. Instead, he had led his people into a trap set by masters of war. He thought of Admiral Patterson, the woman in the small ship who had delivered the warning. She had known. She had known exactly what was waiting for them, and she had given them one chance to leave. They had laughed at her. Now Zaxtor understood why her eyes had looked like ice. They were the eyes of a predator that had already won. "All ships," he said quietly, "retreat. Get us out of here." But as the devastation turned to flee, he saw human vessels moving to cut off his escape. They were not just winning this battle. They were making sure no one survived to tell the tale. Fleet Commander Zaxtor, conqueror of 4 civilizations, realized that he was about to become a footnote in human history. The last thing he saw was the flash of human weapons filling his viewport with light. The Galactic Council had sent observer ships to document the destruction of Earth. They expected to record another tragic chapter in the galaxy's long history of conquest and extinction. Instead, they witnessed something that would change their understanding of humanity forever. The battle near Jupiter lasted less than 4 hours. When it was over, 600 HFY warships had been destroyed. Another 150 were crippled and drifting. The remaining 50 had surrendered after their flagship exploded, with Fleet Commander Zaxtor still aboard. The human fleet had lost only 37 vessels. The observers transmitted everything back to the Council in real time. Delegates watched from their chambers across the galaxy, their disbelief growing with every passing minute. Some refused to believe what they were seeing. Others began to quietly review their own military arrangements with Earth's trade routes. But the space battle was only the beginning. While the main fleet engaged the HFY Armada, a smaller force of enemy ships had slipped past and launched landing parties toward Earth's surface. 300 transport vessels carrying 50,000 HFY soldiers touched down across the planet. They targeted major cities, expecting to find terrified civilians and weak resistance. They found something very different. Lieutenant Danny Cole crouched behind a shattered concrete wall in what had once been downtown Chicago. The city was burning around him, fires reaching up into the gray sky like orange fingers. The streets were filled with debris, overturned vehicles, and the bodies of HFY soldiers. Danny was 26 years old. He had grown up in a small town in Colorado, hunting deer with his father and learning to track animals through mountain forests. When he joined the military, his instructors had recognized something in him. He was patient, he was quiet, and he was very, very good at making things die. Now, he led a squad of 8 soldiers through the ruins, hunting aliens who had dared to invade his home. "Movement ahead," whispered Private Amy Torres, the squad's spotter. She was lying flat on a pile of rubble, looking through a scope. 6 targets. Big ones. They're setting up some kind of heavy weapon. Danny nodded and hand-signaled to his team. They spread out without a word, each soldier moving to a pre-planned position. This was not the first HFY patrol they had engaged today. It would not be the last. The HFY were fearsome creatures. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor that could stop small-caliber rounds. Their claws could tear through steel. Their weapons fired plasma bolts that could vaporize a human instantly. On paper, they were superior in every way. But paper did not account for 10,000 years of human warfare. Danny raised his rifle and sighted on the largest HFY, what looked like an officer. The alien was barking orders at its soldiers, completely unaware that 8 pairs of human eyes were watching from the shadows. "Fire," Danny said softly. 8 rifles spoke at once. The shots were precisely aimed at the gaps in HFY armor, the joints and neck areas where their natural protection was weakest. The officer went down first, a round through its throat. 2 more fell, before the survivors even understood they were under attack. The remaining 3 HFY opened fire wildly, spraying plasma in all directions. But Danny's squad had already moved. They were ghosts in the rubble, appearing and disappearing, never where the enemy expected them to be. Private Marcus Webb flanked left and tossed a grenade into the HFY position. The explosion sent 1 alien flying. Corporal Nina Santos finished it with a burst to the head before it could recover. The last HFY tried to run. Danny tracked it calmly, leading his target like he had led deer back home, and put 3 rounds through its spine. The massive creature crashed to the ground and did not move again. "Clear," Danny announced. The entire engagement had lasted 12 seconds. This scene was repeating itself across the planet. HFY soldiers who had expected to massacre helpless civilians found themselves facing enemies who knew every street, every building, every shadow. Humans fought from rooftops and sewers and subway tunnels. They set traps and ambushes. They attacked and vanished before the HFY could respond. The aliens had superior technology. Humans had superior tactics. And on the ground, tactics won. In New York, a HFY battalion was surrounded and destroyed in Central Park by a force half its size. In Tokyo, civilians who had been evacuated returned with hunting rifles and kitchen knives to help soldiers clear their neighborhoods. In London, an elderly veteran named George Murray led a group of survivors through underground passages to safety, killing 3 HFY along the way with nothing but a fire axe and 70 years of stubborn determination. The HFY had never encountered anything like this. Their previous conquests had faced them with armies that fought in neat formations, that surrendered when overwhelmed, that valued their own lives above victory. Humans did not fight that way. Humans fought like cornered animals, vicious and unpredictable, and absolutely unwilling to give up. By nightfall, The Krathavi landing forces had been reduced by half. By dawn, the survivors were begging for extraction that would never come. The human fleet had destroyed every transport ship in orbit. Danny Cole sat on a piece of broken concrete and watched the sun rise over Chicago. His uniform was torn and stained with blood, both red and the strange purple of HFY. He had not slept in 30 hours. He had killed more enemies than he could count. Amy Torres sat down beside him and handed him a bottle of water. "Think it's over?" Danny drank deeply and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, the human fleet was hunting down the last of the HFY stragglers. Down here, cleanup operations were beginning. The invasion was broken. "This part is over," he said. "But the galaxy knows about us now. They've seen what we can do." Amy nodded slowly. "Is that good or bad?" Danny thought about the question. Humanity had revealed itself to the universe, not as the primitive weaklings the Council believed them to be, but as something far more dangerous. Others would fear it, and some might see it as a threat that needed to be eliminated. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know one thing. Anyone else who comes here looking for an easy conquest is going to learn the same lesson the HFY learned." He looked out at the ruined city, at the fires still burning and the rescue teams already moving through the streets. Humanity had been hurt today, but humanity had also won, and the galaxy would never forget it. 2 weeks after the battle, Ambassador Talia Morrison returned to the Galactic Council chamber. The journey from Earth had been quiet. She had spent most of it reviewing reports and preparing for the conversations ahead. Commander Jake Harris sat across from her in the shuttle, cleaning a ceremonial pistol that he would wear on his belt during the session. "They're going to be afraid of us now," Jake said without looking up. Talia nodded. "Some of them. Others will be curious. A few might even be grateful. The HFY had enemies throughout the galaxy. And some will want to know our weaknesses. They'll want to know how to beat us if they ever need to." "Yes," Talia agreed. "That's why we need to be very careful about what we say today." The shuttle docked at the council station, and they made their way through corridors that suddenly seemed much more respectful than before. Alien delegates who had ignored them for years now stepped aside and bowed their heads as they passed. Some looked at them with admiration. Others could not hide their fear. The great hall was packed when they entered. Every seat was filled, and observers lined the walls. The holographic displays showed news feeds from across the galaxy, all of them featuring images from the battle near Jupiter. The destruction of the HFY fleet played on loop, set against commentary in dozens of alien languages. High Speaker Vornax waited at the central podium. His forearms were perfectly still, a sign that he was deeply unsettled. When Talia took her place at the human delegation's podium, he addressed her immediately. "Ambassador Morrison, the Galactic Council formally welcomes you back. We wish to express our congratulations on your species' victory against the HFY Dominion." Talia inclined her head. "Thank you, High Speaker. Earth is grateful for the Council's neutrality during the conflict." A murmur ran through the crowd. Neutrality. The word hung in the air like an accusation. The Council had stood by and watched, expecting humanity to be destroyed. Now, they had to face the survivors. Counselor Mixine rose from her seat. Her scales had lost some of their shimmer, and her voice was not as confident as it had been 2 weeks ago. "Ambassador, the Council has reviewed the recordings from our observer vessels. We must confess that we are deeply confused by what we witnessed." "Confused how, Counselor?" "Your weapons were more advanced than our projections suggested. Your tactics were unlike anything in our military databases. Your soldiers fought with a ferocity that our analysts cannot explain." Mixine paused and seemed to gather her courage. "Ambassador, how did your species become so effective at warfare?" Talia had expected this question. She had spent days preparing her answer, knowing that the wrong words could make humanity seem like a threat to be contained, rather than a neighbor to be respected. Counselor, may I speak frankly? Please do. Talia stepped out from behind her podium and walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye in the room followed her. She was a small figure in that vast space, surrounded by beings twice her size, but she showed no fear. Humanity has been at war with itself for as long as we can remember, she began. Our earliest recorded histories are filled with battles. We fought over territory, over resources, over ideas, over differences so small that we can barely understand them now. For 10,000 years, we killed each other in ever more creative and terrible ways. She paused and looked around the chamber. We invented the sword and the spear, then the bow and arrow, then guns that could kill from a distance. Then bombs that could destroy entire cities, then weapons that could poison the air and water for generations. We created machines that could think faster than any living mind, and we used them to make our weapons even more deadly. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably. The prof delegate looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. By the time we developed spaceflight, we had already created weapons capable of ending all life on our planet, multiple times over. We had already fought 2 wars that killed hundreds of millions of our own people. We had already learned every lesson that war can teach. High Speaker Vornak spoke carefully. And yet you achieved peace among yourselves. How? We got tired of dying, Talia said simply. We realized that if we did not stop, we would destroy ourselves completely. So we built systems to prevent war. We created laws and treaties and institutions that forced us to solve our problems without violence. It took generations, but eventually we succeeded. Counselor Mixine leaned forward. If you achieved peace, why did you maintain such powerful military forces? Jake Harris answered from the human podium. His voice was calm and steady. Because peace is not the same as safety, Counselor. We knew that the universe was vast and that other species existed. We knew that someday we might encounter beings who did not share our commitment to peace. So we kept our weapons. We kept training our soldiers. We kept developing new technologies. We hoped we would never need them, Talia added. We hoped that when we met other species, they would be friendly and curious, the way we tried to be. For 300 years that hope seemed justified. The Council welcomed us. Trade flourished. We began to believe that the galaxy was a peaceful place. Her expression hardened slightly. Then the Krathvi came, and we remembered why we had kept our weapons sharp. The chamber was silent. Talia reached into her pocket and produced a small data chip. She held it up so everyone could see. This chip contains a complete analysis of Krathvi military weaknesses. Their shield frequencies, their weapon ranges, their tactical patterns, everything we learned during the battle. She walked to the central podium and placed the chip in front of High Speaker Vornax. We are giving this information freely to every species that has suffered under Krathvi aggression. Use it to defend yourselves. Use it to free your conquered worlds. Use it however you see fit. Vornax stared at the chip as if it might bite him. You are sharing your strategic advantages? Your military secrets? Some of them, Talia admitted. Not all, but enough to help others protect themselves. Why would you do this? Talia smiled softly. Because we do not want to rule the galaxy, High Speaker. We have no interest in conquest or domination. We simply want to live in peace with our neighbors, and to help others do the same. The Krathvi were a threat to everyone. Now they are broken. If our knowledge can prevent another species from suffering what we almost suffered, then sharing it is the right thing to do. She looked around the chamber one last time. Humanity has learned many lessons from our long history of war. The most important lesson is this. True strength is not about how many enemies you can defeat. It is about how many friends you can make. We offer the galaxy our friendship. We hope you will accept it. The chamber remained silent as she returned to her podium. But in that silence, something had shifted. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Respect. And perhaps the first seeds of trust. High Speaker Vornax finally spoke. The Council will need time to review this information and discuss its implications. But on behalf of all member species, I thank humanity for its generosity. Talia nodded gracefully. Take all the time you need, High Speaker. Earth will be here when you are ready. And Jake turned and walked out of the chamber together. Behind them, the galaxy began to reconsider everything it thought it knew about the small blue planet called Earth. 6 months had passed since the battle that changed the galaxy. On Earth, the scars of the invasion were slowly healing. Cities that had burned were being rebuilt. Memorials stood in parks and public squares, honoring those who had fallen defending their world. Life continued, as it always did, with humanity proving once again its remarkable ability to endure. In Colorado, Lieutenant Danny Cole walked up the gravel path to his family's farmhouse. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still covered with snow, even as spring began to warm the valleys below. He had grown up in this place, running through these fields as a child, learning to hunt in these forests with his father. Now he was coming home. The front door opened before he reached it, and a small figure came running toward him. His daughter Lily was 4 years old, with bright eyes and tangled hair that her mother had given up trying to brush. She slammed into his legs with enough force to almost knock him over. "Daddy's home," she screamed. Danny dropped his bag and lifted her up, holding her against his chest. She smelled like soap and grass and everything good in the world. He closed his eyes and let himself feel something other than a soldier for the first time in months. His wife Maria appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She was trying to look calm, but he could see the relief in her eyes. She had spent 6 months not knowing if he was alive or dead, watching news reports and jumping every time her phone rang. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey yourself," he replied. They stood there for a long moment, the three of them together, while the wind rustled through the trees and the sun warmed their faces. The war was over. That was all that mattered right now. Later, after Lily had been put to bed and the house was quiet, Danny sat on the porch with Maria and watched the stars come out. Somewhere up there, beyond the atmosphere, human ships still patrolled. The galaxy was watching Earth now, and Earth was watching back. "Are you okay?" Maria asked. It was a simple question without a simple answer. Danny had seen things in Chicago that would stay with him forever. He had killed more beings than he could count. He had watched friends die, and enemies fall, and cities burn. Was he okay? "I will be," he said finally. "It's going to take time, but I'll be okay." Maria took his hand and squeezed it. She did not ask for details. She did not need to know everything. She just needed to know that he was still there, still the man she had married, still capable of sitting on this porch and watching the stars. Thousands of light years away, the galaxy was indeed changing. The Krathvi Dominion collapsed within 3 months of the battle. Species they had conquered for centuries suddenly found the courage to rise up, using the tactical data that humanity had shared freely with anyone who wanted it. Slave worlds became free worlds. Oppressive governors were overthrown. A brutal empire that had terrorized hundreds of systems simply fell apart. The Galactic Council watched these developments with a mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief because the Krathvi had been a threat to everyone. Anxiety because humanity had demonstrated exactly how dangerous it could be when provoked. Ambassador Talia Morrison was appointed to a newly created position, Special Advisor on Defense. It was supposed to be ceremonial, a way for the Council to show respect without giving humanity real power. But Talia turned it into something more. She traveled to dozens of worlds, helping them build defensive systems and train their militaries. She shared human tactical principles with anyone willing to learn. She became a symbol of what humanity represented to the galaxy, strength tempered by wisdom, power guided by principle. Not everyone was happy about humanity's new status. Some species resented the sudden shift in galactic politics. Others feared that Earth would eventually turn its military might against them. A few even began secretly researching ways to counter human weapons and tactics, just in case. Admiral Ben Carver knew about these developments. He received regular intelligence briefings even in retirement, sitting in his small house by the ocean, and reading reports that would have terrified most people. He was prepared. "They'll test us eventually," he told a visitor one afternoon. The visitor was a young officer named Sam Porter, who had served under Carver during the battle and was now being groomed for command. "Not today, maybe not for years, but eventually some species will decide that humans are too dangerous to leave alone. They'll try something." "What do we do about it?" Sam asked. Carver looked out at the waves rolling onto the beach. He was an old man now, tired from a lifetime of service, but his eyes were still sharp. "We do what we've always done. We watch. We prepare. We hope for peace, but plan for war. And if someone comes for us again, we show them the same thing we showed the Krathvi. Which is that humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not give up. Humanity fights until the last breath, and then figures out a way to keep fighting after that." Carver smiled slightly. "It's not pretty. It's not noble, but it's who we are, and the galaxy is starting to understand that." Back on the council station, Talia Morrison stood at a viewport and watched ships from a dozen species pass by. Trade had increased dramatically since the Krathvi fell. New alliances were being formed. The galaxy was more connected than ever before. Jake Harris joined her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He gave her one and stood beside her in comfortable silence. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. "The peace, I mean." Jake considered the question. "Nothing lasts forever, but I think we bought ourselves some time. A lot of time, maybe. Long enough for things to change, for species to learn to trust each other, for old enemies to become friends. And if it doesn't last, if someone else decides to attack Earth?" Jake shrugged. "Then we do what we did before. We fight, we win, we rebuild, and we try again." He took a sip of his coffee. "That's what humans do, Talia. We keep trying. No matter how many times we get knocked down, we get back up. It's the one thing about us that never changes." Talia smiled and looked back out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were going about their lives, building families and businesses and dreams. Most of them would never visit Earth. Most of them would never meet a human. But all of them knew now that humanity existed, and that humanity was not to be taken lightly. The debris field near Jupiter had become something of a tourist attraction. Ships from across the galaxy made pilgrimages to see the remnants of the Krathvi Armada, floating silently among the moons. It was a monument to what happened when someone underestimated the small blue planet in the outer spiral arm. A reminder, a warning, a promise. On Earth, children played in rebuilt parks, while their parents worked to create a better future. Soldiers patrolled the borders of human space, vigilant and ready. Scientists developed new technologies that would make humanity even stronger. And somewhere in Colorado, a little girl fell asleep in her father's arms, while he told her stories about heroes and monsters, and the day the aliens came. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it. And whatever came next, whatever challenges the future held, one thing was certain. Earth would endure. It always had. It always would. Because that was what humans did. They survived. They adapted. They overcame. And anyone who forgot that lesson would learn it the same way the Krathvi had learned it, written in fire among the moons of Jupiter. The stars shone down on 1,000 worlds that night. On one of those worlds, a small blue planet third from its sun. Humanity looked up at those stars and wondered what adventures waited out there. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known universe. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a monument to cooperation and peace among the stars. Inside its curved walls, representatives from 400 different species gathered to discuss matters of trade, law, and sometimes war. Today they had gathered to discuss a small blue planet called Earth. High Speaker Vornax stood at the central podium. He was a Zalathi, a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms that moved constantly when he spoke. His voice echoed through the chamber as he read from the official report. The Krathvi Dominion has declared a state of war against the species known as humans. Their fleet departed 3 days ago. They intend to conquer and enslave the population of Earth. Murmurs spread through the assembly. The Krathvi were well known to everyone present. They were a brutal species that had conquered 17 worlds in the past century. Their soldiers were massive, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with thick armored skin and claws that could tear through metal. Their warships were among the most powerful in the galaxy, and they had just declared war on humanity. Ambassador Talia Morrison stood at the human delegation's podium near the back of the chamber. She was a small woman by human standards, with short dark hair and calm brown eyes. She had served as Earth's representative to the Council for 15 years, and in that time she had learned to read the mood of alien crowds. Right now, the mood was a mixture of pity and amusement. Beside her stood Commander Jake Harris. He was a military officer assigned to protect the diplomatic mission. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that rarely showed emotion. His hands rested easily at his sides, but Talia knew he was watching everything. Counselor Maxine of the Varathi rose from her seat. She was a slender being covered in shimmering scales, and her voice carried a tone of false sympathy. This is most unfortunate news for the human delegation. The Krathvi are not known for mercy. Perhaps the Council should discuss emergency relocation procedures for the human population. Several other counselors nodded in agreement. A few were already pulling up data on their screens, calculating how many refugees Earth might produce. High Speaker Vornax turned his large eyes toward Talia. Ambassador Morrison, does your government wish to formally request protection from the Council? We can dispatch a peacekeeping force, though I must warn you that it may not arrive in time. Talia felt hundreds of alien eyes watching her. She had received instructions from Earth just hours ago, and she knew exactly what she needed to say. She also knew that no one in this room would believe her. She stepped forward and spoke clearly. High Speaker, the government of Earth thanks the Council for its concern. However, we will not be requesting protection. We will handle this matter ourselves. The chamber went silent for a moment. Then laughter began to ripple through the crowd. It was not mean laughter, not exactly. It was the kind of laughter people make when a child says something innocent and foolish. Counselor Mixine tilted her head. Ambassador, perhaps you do not fully understand the situation. The Krathvi Armada consists of 800 warships. Their soldiers number in the millions. Your planet has been part of the galactic community for less than 3 centuries. You have no experience with warfare on this scale. We have experience with warfare, Jake Harris said quietly. More laughter. A delegate from the Proth Collective, a species of small furry beings, spoke up. Commander, we have studied your history. Your species has indeed fought many wars, against each other, with primitive weapons, guns and bombs and simple nuclear devices. The Krathvi have plasma cannons that can melt continents. Jake did not respond. His expression remained calm. Talia raised her hand for silence. We understand the Council's concerns. We are not asking for help, and we are not asking for intervention. We simply request that the Council remain neutral in this conflict. Do not assist the Krathvi, and do not interfere with our response. High Speaker Vornax studied her for a long moment. His 4 arms had stopped moving, which meant he was thinking carefully. Ambassador, I must ask directly. Does Earth have some secret weapon or defense that we are not aware of? Talia smiled slightly. High Speaker, Earth has many things that the galaxy is not aware of. We are a young species, and we have kept to ourselves. Perhaps that was a mistake. Perhaps we should have shared more about our nature and our capabilities. Then share now, Counselor Mixine demanded. Tell us how you plan to defeat a force that has crushed every opponent it has ever faced. Talia exchanged a glance with Jake. There was a silent conversation between them, the kind that old colleagues can have without words. Then she turned back to the council. I cannot reveal our military strategies in an open forum. What I can tell you is this. Humanity has spent its entire existence fighting for survival. We fought the Ice Ages. We fought disease and famine. We fought predators and natural disasters. And yes, we fought each other. For 10,000 years, we perfected the art of war. She paused and looked around the chamber. When we finally achieved peace among ourselves, we did not forget those lessons. We simply put them aside, hoping we would never need them again. But we always knew that someday, something might come from the stars to threaten us. We have been preparing for that day since we first looked up at the night sky. The laughter had stopped. The chamber was quiet now, but it was not the silence of respect. It was the silence of disbelief. High Speaker Vornax finally spoke. Very well, Ambassador. The Council will honor your request for neutrality. We will observe and document the conflict for historical purposes. Talia heard what he did not say. They would document the extinction of humanity, another species that had overestimated itself and paid the price. Thank you, High Speaker, she said simply. As she and Jake left the chamber, she could hear the whispers starting behind her. Words like delusional and tragic and pride before destruction floated through the air. Jake walked beside her in silence until they reached their shuttle. Only then did he speak. They think we're already dead. Talia nodded. Let them think that. In 3 weeks they'll learn the truth. She looked up at the stars through the viewport. Somewhere out there, 800 Krathvi warships were racing toward Earth. She felt no fear. Only a cold, patient certainty. Earth had been waiting for this moment for a very long time.